I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're talking to the great American political prognosticator himself, Rich Rubino, the author of 5 books, including his latest, The Great American Political Trivia Challenge, Political Trivia on Steroids. Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Logan.
Let's talk a little bit about the current climate politically. The State of the Union address, what kind of grade would you give President Biden?
I would say about a B. Somewhere around there. It was interesting. I think certainly it was interesting what he did in many respects is that he wasn't necessarily trying to placate the base, which I think he tried to do in his address to Congress in 2020. By the way, 2021 rather. By the way, with the first address that he delivers to Congress is not technically called State of the Union. It's called more the President's Address to Congress. So this was really technically his first State of the Union address. But I think what the interesting part that I found is that he was trying to inoculate Democrats in the midterm elections for some of the inevitable charges the Republicans are going to make. The Democrats were really hurt in 2020, for example, when they had kind of the incubus of being supporters of quote unquote defund the police. He said, we're not going to defund the police, we're going to fund the police. And that's obviously something that I think he's saying to try to benefit the Democrats that are up in the midterms elections. But obviously in 2022, the historical pattern is almost invariably that the party that holds the White House is going to lose seats. Now, the House is very close. The Senate is literally tied 50-50. And they've already have about 30 Democrats who've announced they're not running for re-election. Now, some of them are in safe districts, so they're not necessarily worried about their own political prospects, but they know that the Democrats are likely not to have a majority, and they'll be able to get a lot less done in the minority. So, you generally speaking, the first 2 years of the presidency is when the president really has to kind of be on fire, if you will, and get as much of his legislative program he can through the United States Congress, because those second 2 years, unless he does what Bill Clinton did in his second 2 years, essentially work with the Republican Congress on welfare reform, on Kennedy-Kassenbaum, on increasing the minimum wage.
Let me stop you there for just a second, Rich. I totally agree with your letter grade. He is a B. And part of the reason is that the bar is set so low with him. I feel like if he gets through the speech without a major stumble, he gets a lot of points for that. 2, it was a very moderate address. I mean, he talked about a lot of platitudes and issues and ideas that few people could disagree with. We all want to be united, at least in spirit, against Russia in Ukraine's fight against the invading enemy. Who could debate that? We all were there. What bothered me about the speech was it sounded very generic. It could have been read by Trump. It could have been read by Clinton. It could have been read by any American president. The issues haven't changed. The promises haven't changed. It seems like the same old stuff.
Well, it's interesting because usually an address like that is the inauguration address. Usually the president's inauguration addresses are seen as generic. They try to talk in platitude and say as little of substance as possible. Generally, the State of the Union is usually a partisan speech where the president presents us, kind of a litany of his legislative agenda. In this case, that was a lot different. I think Ukraine kind of transmogrificated the entire speech, because the beginning he would, as opposed to talking about his domestic programs, he was talking about the Ukraine, which is something that got Republicans and Democrats to stand up. And then when he did talk about his legislative programs, he tried to kind of placate the center. But obviously, this was more of a State of the Union address. I mean, this was more of an inauguration address than it was a State of the Union address. But you're right. It reminds me in some respects of some of Bill Clinton's addresses in the late 90s, when Bill Clinton would essentially try, he talked about, remember in 1995, he talked about 1996, right? He talked about school uniforms. People were saying, how is the president talking about school uniforms in an inauguration address? I mean, in a State of the Union address. Is very similar to what Joe Biden is doing, but obviously he's trying to he's trying to make the Democrats seem palatable to a general election constituency for the 2022 midterm elections, I think.
And he absolutely achieved that goal. I think he did a good job on that, whether you're for him or against him or somewhere in the middle. Let me have you take out your crystal ball right now, Rich.
Yes.
Take a look into it far into the future. The year is 2024. Who do you see running for the Democrats? Who do you see running for the Republicans? Do you think that Biden is a shoo-in to be the nominee for the Democratic Party, as is custom?
No, my supposition is that he won't run, but he's going to say that he's going to run, because if he says that he's not going to run, he automatically becomes a lame duck. So until about mid 2023, he's going to say, I'm going to run. My guess is that he is going to decide not to run, and in which case it's going to be a complete free for all. You're going to see every Democrat that's ever thought about running for president, it's going to be an open seat. I think Vice President Harris will run, but she's not going to be the preponderant front runner, as usually vice presidents are, whether it was Humphrey, whether it was Bush, whether it was Gore, because for one thing, she has really hurt herself with her left flank. And I don't think she's ever going to be able to overcome all of the people that she put in prison for marijuana use when she was a district attorney. The body politic and the views have really changed on that. And if you ever see that debate with her and Tulsi Gabbard in the Democratic primary, where Tulsi Gabbard really went after her, she's never overcome that before. And as a result, she was at less than 1% and had to drop out of the presidential race. So I don't see where she's going to come back. Now, that being said,
let's talk about the Republican side for a little bit. So it's probably going to be a free for all on the Democrat side if everything happens as you say. And I agree with you in part. My prediction is in the third year of his presidency, Biden is going to step aside. Kamala Harris will assume the highest office of the land, and then she will run as an incumbent. That's how I see it going down. I think that die was cast long ago, and that's the deal that was made.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, because I don't know. First of all, I don't think that the Biden-Harris relationship is all that close. I think he picked her more out of necessity. He had made the case that he was going to pick a woman. I think there were other candidates, Val Demings, Karen Bass, and he basically chose her in a sense by default, but they don't have that particularly close of a relationship. He doesn't necessarily leave that many responsibilities to her. I don't think Biden wants in history to be remembered as somebody who stepped aside in the middle of his term. I think he would rather be seen as somebody who served as a transitional figure from the Trump years to another Democrat. And I think somebody who would carry on the torch. But I think it's going to be somebody younger. I think I'm looking at someone like Ray Cooper, the governor of North Carolina. The problem he has is just a Republican lieutenant governor of North Carolina. So every time he's out of state running for president, the Republican lieutenant governor takes over. But he's somebody a moderate, a Southerner from a swing state, relatively charismatic, who I think would be a good nominee. I think Pete Buttigieg has been wanted to run since he was probably 23 years old, and he's somebody that's probably going to run as well. I think Amy Klobuchar is probably going to try it again. I don't think Elizabeth Warren is going to. I think she's probably going to run for re-election instead. I think she was kind of embarrassed by her showing in her own state of Massachusetts last time. But so that's my guess on the Democratic side. And also probably maybe Congressman Galeo of Arizona, and probably a lot of Democrats that you're not even thinking of right now are probably going to run. But I see Harris running, but I don't see her being the preponderant front runner.
And fortune telling is a tough business, considering Andrew Cuomo a year and a half ago was the darling of the Democrat Party, and today he is on the unemployment line. Let's talk about the Republican side for the 2024 race a little bit. Trump, of course, wants it, and Ron DeSantis looks like he wants it. Where do you see this going?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, if Trump does see polls that show he would lose the general election, my supposition he does not run because he does not want to be remembered in history as somebody who lost twice. I think he would rather say, I won the first election and the second election was stolen from me. Now, Ron DeSantis, first of all, is he's running for re-election in Florida, and he's not necessarily a shoo-in. Now, it's a Republican year, and I think he's going to win re-election. Charlie Crist, the former governor of Florida, seems to be the front runner. Nikki Fried is also running. My guess is that during a debate, they're going to ask him the question, do you agree to serve out your full term? And because the election's so close, he's going to have to say yes. Now, when George W. Bush ran for re-election as governor in 98, he had to say, no, I don't make that promise, but he was also ahead by 40 points. And Bill Clinton in 1990 made the promise, then he had to renege on it and go after the 1990 election. So my guess is that Ron DeSantis is going to have to make that promise, and then he's going to have to figure out some reason, if Trump does not run, why he can do a better job as president for the state of Florida than as governor. So, I mean, so it's going to be a very interesting, delicate balance. But I agree, he certainly is the front runner right now. If Donald Trump does not run, I think Donald Trump is very acrimonious toward him, in part because he supported him in the primary over Agriculture Commissioner Adam Putnam. And now DeSantis does not say that he will not run if Donald Trump runs. So it's an interesting paradigm. Also look for Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, who I think will probably run. I think Nikki Haley, former governor of South Carolina, former ambassador to the UN, will probably run. And you know what? I would watch either, if Liz Cheney does not win re-election, either her or Adam Kinzinger, the former congressman, the current congressman from Illinois, who's not running for re-election. One of them will run as the quote unquote anti-Trump Republican, I think. And they will try to bring the Republican Party back to the status quo ante to where it was before Trump. And there'll be 73 other people that most people have never heard of. Everyone who's run for Cemetery Commission as a Republican is going to be running for president, or at least considering it.
Exactly. The chief dog catcher of Pinellas County, Florida, is going to be running as well, no doubt. Let's talk a little bit about your book. I can see why you wrote a book about trivia, because I think few people in this country know as much about politics as you do. Now, as you went through all of the little facts and interesting tidbits of the political scene over the course of the 200 plus years of our republic, was there one bit of trivia that you found completely fascinating?
Yes, absolutely. There is one president who is obscure in the United States, arguably the most obscure president, yet in the country of Paraguay, they literally have a national holiday for him. They have a villa named after him. There's a soccer team named after him. And Ohio Wesleyan University, there's a scholarship where folks in Paraguay get to get essentially a free ride to that university in the name of, guess which president this is?
You know, I'm just going to pull an obscure president out of my hat because I have no idea. Martin Van Buren.
No, Rutherford Burchard Hayes.
Right,
So
right.
why
Which
do
was
they
my
care-
second guess. I swear I'm not lying.
Oh, I agree. So
Yes.
why is Rutherford B. Hayes a legend in Paraguay? Well, this was not 1877, 1881. He was president. There was no League of Nations, no United Nations. So often other countries would come to the United States to settle their disputes. So Paraguay and Argentina came to the United States, and about 60% of the land, which eventually became Paraguay, the United States was essentially used their good offices and was the honest broker. And Hayes agreed to give Paraguay 60% of the land that it currently has. Now, he probably had not much to do with it. It was actually Secretary of State William Evarts who did most of it. But in Paraguay, he's literally a household word. They have, as I say, they have a scholarship for him. He's basically, they think of him as probably the greatest American president. They think people in the United States think of him as the greatest American president. And by the way, there was a reality television show, and the winner got to go to the Rutherford B. Hayes Presidential Library and Museum in Fremont, Ohio. Now, by contrast, in the United States, in Delaware, Ohio, where he was born, there was a gas station right at that scene. And there's a little rock that says this is where Rutherford B. Hayes was born. By the way, Rutherford B. Hayes was the only president born in Delaware.
Amazing.
Delaware, Ohio.
Okay, Delaware, Ohio, I say, because wasn't our current president born in Delaware?
He was
I'm not
born
sure.
in Scranton, technically, and then he moved to Delaware later.
That's right. He talks about Scranton probably more than Delaware, right? Because Ohio is a more important state. Okay, let me quiz you a little bit now. Okay, I'm going to start out with a very easy question.
Okay.
This modern day president ran with the theme "Re-elect the president." Who am I talking about?
Oh, that would be a couple. I would say that would be Woodrow Wilson.
Might be right. I mean, you're thinking too far back into your history. But how about this? The committee to re-elect the president.
Oh, Richard Nixon.
There you go.
Yes, creep.
Exactly. But yeah, there used to be buttons back in the 70s when he was running that said, re-elect the president. Now, I've got a quote for you, okay?
Yes.
And this is a modern political leader who has commented on the situation in Ukraine. And the person said, quote, "Ukraine is a country in Europe. It is next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia decided to invade Ukraine. And that's basically a bad thing."
Joe Biden?
What's your second guess if it's not
Donald
Joe
Trump.
Biden?
Donald Trump.
It's so funny because there are so many people who could have said this. If it was Trump, he would have said a very special country or used a few more adjectives, right? That was actually Kamala Harris. And when asked to explain the conflict in Ukraine to the American people. Okay, I don't want you to quiz me because I'll get them wrong. And I don't want you to show the audience how stupid I really am.
Oh, God, no.
But do tell me another one of your favorite questions.
Okay, well, here's one. This United States president, when the Pope came to the United States, he gave the president a picture of the nativity scene. They went to the Waldorf Astoria, and the president in return gave the Pope a 5-inch bust of himself.
My guess is Jack Kennedy.
So close.
Eisenhower.
Going the other way.
Kennedy. LBJ.
Yes, LBJ.
Really? Okay. I was the right era anyway. Yeah.
He had 200 statuettes made of himself, and he would give these to foreign dignitaries that would come to the United States as a gift. So they would give him something, and Johnson in return would give him a 5-inch bust of Lyndon Johnson.
That's amazing. You know, I do the same thing. In fact, I'm going to send you the 5-inch bust of myself after the show. Tell me how folks can get your book, Rich.
That would be great. Yes, you can just Google Rich and then Rubino, Rubino. It's on Amazon.com. You can also find me on Facebook or find me on Twitter at Rich Rubino Paul. But if you just Google, and if you Google the Great American Political Trivia Challenge, political trivia on steroids, and it should come right up.
Yeah, it's an awesome idea. I think it's great to have at your summer house. I think it's great to have as a gift for someone. This is something that'll bring the family together where you can talk and learn and share experiences. You know, we're too much connected only by electronics like we are now. And this book is something that kind of brings people together in an old-fashioned way. You can hold up that book again. It is called The Great American Political Trivia Challenge. Political trivia on steroids. It's a fun read, and I recommend it to all our viewers. Rich Rubino, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Logan Crawford. Thanks for joining me on Spotlight.